What's going on, everybody? Welcome to our round of 16 Europa League predictions, and today was the draw as well as the final game being played. I don't remember why it was played on a Friday, but Frankfurt and Salzburg drew 2-2, and Frankfurt went on through to the next round to play Basel. So we're going to jump right on into it. All 8 ties, and hopefully we can do something right. If you haven't already, check out our Champions League predictions as well, and we'll continue to do these as we go, as well as some other videos and things. Like my next video should be talking about Chelsea's torrid transfer window, and we've got some other top 10s coming as well, so feel free to stick around for those, guys. But let's jump right on into it. All right, let's start with two teams who may be going into their second legs. Probably didn't seem as favorites to go through. We have got Istanbulspor here and FC Copenhagen. Now, Copenhagen 1-1 after their home leg against Celtic. A lot of people figured Celtic would go back to Scotland and grab a result. They didn't. Copenhagen played really well, grabbed a 3-1 win, and knocked Celtic out. And then Başakşehir, who lost 3-1 in their first leg to Sporting, which is quite a good team, and then came back and finished winning 5-4 on aggregate. So they win themselves they get themselves through with a very quality win over a good Portuguese side. Now these two have obviously had pretty decent years in the Europa League as well, but at this stage in the competition, we're getting to a point where teams are going to start taking this really, really seriously. So while there were some decently high scores, I don't expect this one to be overly high scoring, but I am going to lean just toward the Turkish side. I feel once you grab a big win in a European competition, it kind of pushes its way into the next round for me. In this case, Başakşehir's huge win over Sporting at home to get them through, which a 4-1 victory was brilliant. A 3-1, of course, for Copenhagen. I just don't think Copenhagen is as good. I like Başakşehir here. I think they just sneak on through after a really good win, and that momentum carries them through to the last 8. I like Başakşehir. I think they get through 3-1 on aggregate. Next, we have Olympiakos and Wolves. Wolves won, beating Espanyol rather heavily. It was 4-0 after the first leg, and then a 2-3 loss. Didn't really change too much as they went through easily enough against Espanyol, and then Olympiakos, of course, knocking Arsenal out. Surprisingly, especially after Arsenal won the first leg in Greece 1-0, grabbed the away goal, grabbed the clean sheet. You feel they come back and do a number, but Olympiakos, then they held in, and they've got some really huge center backs there, and they've got some unique ways of dealing with them on set pieces, of course, which came last time, and then the last goal, which was, kind of lumping it into the mixer, and it kind of fumbled around and it got on through. So using their strengths very wisely in a tough atmosphere at the Emirates. So it's a good, that's a proper win. And Wolves, a team who have Champions League aspirations, whether they reach them this year or not, we will have to see. And they do have a little bit of money to spend as well. So this is going to be a difficult team, of course, and they are trying to build this into a perennial European squad, just like Olympiakos are. They're normally around this area. They have a relatively easier league, of course, but they do their part, and they've maybe not as much recently, but 4 or 5 years ago they were perennials in the Champions League as well. But here are two teams who probably match up relatively well with each other. As I said, Olympiakos, they like to keep it tight, and then set pieces are a huge thing. One thing I think for Wolves, though, is that they have the center backs to deal with this sort of thing. Whether they do, of course, we will have to see. But I'm going to go ahead and lean Wolves' way. I think they see this as a genuine opportunity. And looking down the list of teams who are still left in here, I think Wolves will look at this and think that they have a genuine chance to win this tournament and I think they do just get by Olympiakos. Olympiakos are still a good team, but I think they're overvalued a little bit after their win over Arsenal. I don't think Arsenal are as good as many people seem to think, even all the way down in ninth. I don't think they're any good. And then they may not be in ninth anymore, but very recently they were. And then Wolves are going to have their hands full, but I think they just sneak through. I think there's better quality there. I think there's more consistency about them. I like Wolves to get through Olympiakos here, 4-2 on aggregate. Next we have Rangers and Bayer Leverkusen. A couple of good wins here. Leverkusen got a really impressive win the other day, beating Porto away from home, and then pushing themselves through 5-2 on aggregate. Very impressive, of course. And then Rangers having a bit of a comeback after being 2-0 down at home in the first leg. They come back and win 3-2, and then they go to Portugal and put in a really good performance, winning 1-0 on the road, 4-2 on aggregate over Braga. They've done very, very well for themselves. Also, unfortunately, I think this is probably the most one-sided tie here. Leverkusen just have too many good players. There's too much talent, too much quality here. Rangers have had a pretty decent season. They've been very plucky in Europa League football. Difficult to kind of throw them out of the tournament, really, as Braga found out. You know, you feel 2-0 up on the road, first leg. You're in a really good spot, and then they found a way to throw it away. They don't give up, this Rangers team, and that's probably down to a bit from their manager, Gerrard, but I just don't think there's enough here. I just don't. There's too many good players at Leverkusen. Kai Havertz running the show, Volland up front, Leon Bailey. There are just way too many good players, and I think Leverkusen kind of cruise right through this. Leverkusen to go through 5-1 on aggregate. Next we have Wolfsburg and Shakhtar Donetsk. Two pretty good teams here, of course. Shakhtar with some genuine European pedigree, and then Wolfsburg, of course, kind of in and around this area very often. And we've got some pretty decent teams here, and this should be a pretty decent matchup as well. Wolfsburg cruising by Malmo, and then Shakhtar getting an impressive aggregate win over Benfica, 5-4 on aggregate. I believe they had the away goals too, so Benfica would have needed 2 more to go through. So they've done rather well for themselves, Shakhtar there, and it's an impressive victory. But Wolfsburg down in 7th, having an average-ish year. They feel they probably should be competing more toward the top sooner rather than later. This is probably their level at the moment, but this team used to have a little bit more pedigree about it. And then, of course, Shakhtar on top of the Ukrainian league by a good chunk. As for the matchup, I think that this leans Shakhtar's way, just a touch. I like them to go on through. It's a really good team, and teams have trouble going to Ukraine. It drains them. Especially from Western Europe, but Germany's still kind of on that side. It's more in the middle, perhaps. It's still a decent trek. It is going to be cold. It's going to be difficult to deal with that hostile environment. Shakhtar are a good team. They will play around you. They will hold on to the ball. It's very difficult to go there, and I think that ends up being the important tie here. I think that they get too big of a lead, or if they score early, it's difficult to keep up. I like Shakhtar to go through here, 4-2 on aggregate, into the next round. Next we have Manchester United and LASK. This tie, a lot of people assumed would, be a run over by Manchester United, but if you haven't seen LASK play, they're really good. This is a really good side. Top the Austrian league, ahead of Salzburg, which is, they've had a good year, and they've given some really big teams some trouble. Napoli and Liverpool, of course. Out to Frankfurt, but Frankfurt are another good team as well. And then, of course, Manchester United have all the pedigree in the world after they went right through after recording a relatively easy win over Bruges in that second leg, 5-0, 6-1 on aggregate. And then LASK get through Alkmaar. of the Dutch league, 3-1 on aggregate, which is a pretty decent one as well. But they've had some good results here in the Europa League. They won their group, which had Sporting and Eindhoven in it. That is that's a proper group for the Europa League, and they've done well to win it and done well to get by Alkmaar as well. I think they just fall short here, but this is no pushover for Manchester United, and Manchester United of current times aren't very good, and they go through games where they don't create anything seemingly, and they're incredibly leaky at the back. So Manchester United here, this is no pushover. I think they just sneak through here, though. LASK put up a good fight, but United to go through 3-2 on aggregate, but look out for this. This has upset potential. Next we have Sevilla and Roma, two proper good teams here. Sevilla, of course, 5th, I believe, at the moment in La Liga, and they get through after a close one with Cluj. They finished 1-1 on aggregate, but they got the away goal, and they got through. And then Roma, of course, 5th in Serie A, and they snuck through against Ghent 2-1. Probably both teams underperforming there, you feel. There's some good players here, but both of these squads are really feisty. There aren't going to be a ton of goals over these couple. They both keep it tight defensively. They both like to nick in. Sevilla, I watched them play a preseason game here against Liverpool, which they won 2-1, but they're a very feisty side. They like to, get in tough, tackle, that kind of side. And then Roma, of course, dealing with Serie A, which is just at the moment filled with quality, or at least everyone's pretty decent. There are a lot of good teams there, and they are currently comfortably in 5th. I believe 6 points ahead of 6th place there. So fighting for that Champions League spot at the moment. They're Champions League-ish quality, but there are some good players there as well. As for the tie itself, this is just going to come down to who's going to grab that away goal. This has 2-1 on aggregate written all over it. I'm going to lean with Sevilla here. I think they just sneak through. This is their tournament. They love this tournament. They've had a habit of winning this tournament. It is something that they are very much used to and very much up for at all times. So I think they do just sneak through. I think they grab that away goal and move on through into the round of 8. Next we have Basel, and they are playing Frankfurt. Frankfurt today getting through against Salzburg, 6-3 on aggregate. Very impressive, of course. And then Basel, who got through relatively comfortably over Apoel, 4-0. Two teams, though, that feel they're probably underachieving domestically. Basel 3rd in the Swiss League, 5 points behind St. Gallen and 5 points behind Young Boys. And then Frankfurt, all the way down in 11th, are having a poor year from their recent kind of standards. But these are two pretty good teams. Frankfurt, of course, impressively enough, knocking Salzburg out, who were a Champions League team and pushed Liverpool and Napoli pretty well. If I believe, Salzburg would have won that final day, they would have been through instead of Liverpool, which would have been huge. And then Frankfurt, that was Frankfurt. And then Basel, of course, have this European pedigree. They're normally in that Champions League, in the group, putting up fights. So Basel are a proper good team as well. As for how this goes, I'm leaning toward Basel. I think they sneak through here. Frankfurt, just, to me, not consistent enough this year. Goal scoring wise, defensively wise, it's just not enough for them. And while Basel, perhaps in their league, may not be doing the same in terms of being on top of the league, they're still used to this. Every year they're in Europe. Every year they put up a fight. Every year they're toe-to-toe with some bigger teams. I just think there's too much experience there, and I think they sneak through here. I don't think there are a ton of goals. I like them to go 3-2 on aggregate and just sneak on through to the final 8. And finally, what I believe is the tie of the round, Getafe play Inter Milan. Now this has the ability to be, a really good tie. Inter getting by Ludogorets 4-1, and then Getafe knocking Ajax out very impressively, and they're having a good year as well, Getafe. They are currently 6th, but 1 point back of third, and they were third last week, I believe. So it's very tight at the top of the table. But 1 point back of third. They're having a really good year, having some good results in there as well in La Liga, and then Inter, who are fighting Lazio and Juventus at the top of Serie A. So these are probably two of the best 3 or 4 teams left in the tournament getting matched up against each other. But I am going to lean Getafe's way. And I'm going to lean Getafe because this is a toss-up to me. But Getafe have done well keeping teams off the score sheet. Defensively, they've been pretty solid. Inter as well. But with Inter, I feel like they have more of an issue scoring. It seems to late, but they kind of get 1 or 2 every game, which is obviously you want to score goals, but it never really reaches 3, 4, 5 very often. Getafe, I think, are better up front, and one thing that will come into this is the coronavirus going around the world at the moment, and it'll come into it because I believe Inter are going to play their game behind closed doors. I would assume that would give no advantage whatsoever, and then Getafe have that home field. I don't believe they're playing in front of empty stadiums at the moment. That extra burst that they're going to have at home in front of their home crowd, or the ability to go to Inter and play in a training match type of atmosphere and grab an away goal or 2, I think that just puts them over the edge. I like Getafe here to go through 4-3 on aggregate and get to the final 8. So there you have it, our final 8: Wolves, Sevilla, Shakhtar, Başakşehir, Man United, Getafe, Basel, and Leverkusen. It would set up for a pretty decent final 8, and hopefully we are as close to right as you can possibly be. If you haven't already, as I said, check out our Champions League predictions. We're about halfway through that, and we're in a decent spot. Liverpool will need a result. I believe that's probably where we did well with the other ones mostly. City was a toss-up, but City are ahead there. We did pick Real Madrid to just sneak through that one, but that was probably the best tie of the round. So go ahead, check those out. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Stay tuned, of course, for more. We're going to have a variety of different videos on this channel, all football related. But that's it for now, guys. Peace.